Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for the next hour. My name is John Powell, and I am the VP of Membership Development here at SIG. And today I have the pleasure of facilitating today's webinar entitled LendingTree's Procurement Evolution, Embracing Innovation and Disruption to Transform, presented by our partners at Scout RFP and Denali WNS. Today's webinar is meant to be interactive, so please submit your questions throughout the presentation by typing them in the Q&A box on your WebEx screen. We will do our best to answer all the questions at the conclusion of today's presentation. Before I proceed, I do have just a few housekeeping and calendar items I'd like to review with you. Many of you are familiar with SIG, but for those that may be joining us for the first time, I'd like to welcome you quickly by covering some of the resources we provide. Our global event program is ever evolving, but it simply wouldn't be possible without our attendees. We would love to have you attend one of our regional events or share them with your colleagues. Please check the SIG website frequently for upcoming cities and current agenda. You are participating in today's webinar. These take place on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and all are welcome to attend. Visit our website for a complete listing of upcoming webinars and register today. SIG's peer-to-peer resource is an opportunity to ask top-of-mind questions for instant responses. SIG also has an online resource center that is home to a plethora of tools, templates, white papers, and research documents that will make your job easier each and every day. And who doesn't want that? SIG's Career Network features job postings for sourcing professionals and internship opportunities in all levels of employment. And last, but certainly not least, our Student Talent Outreach Program was designed to find tomorrow's supply chain professionals today, while the students are still learning the industry and developing their skills. Please reach out to me or any of the SIG team members directly if you have any questions or would like more information about any of these programs. We are so excited to announce that we have established these strategic partnerships with our partners. So I went the wrong way in the slide, sorry. All right, we've got some new partners here. We have now partnered with GEP, Everest Group, and SIG Innova. We are very proud to announce these partnerships. Look for more information and details. And as I mentioned earlier, ask anybody on the SIG team. We can give you more details about each and every one of these partnerships. SIG is also partnered with Manu Technologies for the upcoming Impact Sourcing Summit in Uganda. For more information, please visit the website www.manutech.com. Our Global Executive Summits are semi-annual events with more than 350 decision makers in attendance and endless opportunities for networking. The agenda and event details for our Spring Summit in Amelia Island, and by the way, I am talking to you today from Amelia Island. It is beautiful here, and the weather promises to be just as good in a week and a half. We're going to have our summit in about 8 days. It is 75 degrees and sunny each and every single day here. So there are a lot of fun things to do. I am local here. Please let me know if you have any questions about the area. We'd love to have you come and join us for the summit and bring your family along to enjoy an extended stay at the beach. I'll teach you how to find shark's teeth. Here at SIG, we have mixed things up a bit and refreshed our regional event agendas. Please take a look at some of the upcoming events on the SIG website under Networking Events tab. If you have a colleague in any of these cities, please invite them to attend. If you do see the Western Regional event there in Seattle, that one is filling up quickly. We've got a lot of attendees, a lot of great content. Check that one out. If you're in the area, it is definitely something you don't want to miss. SIG University offers training and development opportunities to people of all levels in their sourcing careers. We are currently enrolling for the next semester in all 3 of our programs, which begin on April 15th. You can take advantage of early discounts for the next semester, not this one, if you act quickly. All right, so at this point, it is my pleasure to introduce the presenters that are with us here today. First, I've got Stan Garber. He is the president and co-founder of Scout RFP. He got his start as an entrepreneur early, founding Unisys, where he was still a student at Case Western Reserve University. His experiences at Unisys, which was acquired by Living Social in 2012, made him acutely aware of the need for a simple yet effective strategic sourcing tool which led them to co-found Scout RFP in 2014. Next up, we've got a real-life rocket scientist. We've got Chris Eierman. He is the head of procurement capabilities at WNS Denali, leveraging his 30-plus years of process excellence experience. Chris and his team collaborate with clients to improve their procurement programs and change how our customers leverage procurement. Once again, before joining WNS Denali, Chris held management roles at Free Markets, Ariba, and Exostar. Once again, I was not kidding. He is a real-life rocket scientist with an MS degree in aeronautics and astronautics from MIT, as well as an MBA from Carnegie Mellon University, located in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And our third presenter today, and the one who's going to kick it off, is Michael Leiken. He established and leads the LendingTree's spend management function ever since 2016 and has demonstrated its value as a strategic partner to the business. Prior to LendingTree, Michael spent 7 years at Visa leading the team that supported the product, merchant sales and solutions, processing, global customer care, and CyberSource business units. Michael also has experience negotiating in the quick service, print media, payments, and fintech industries, and his responsibilities have spanned several continents. Michael obtained his BBA in finance with honors from the University of Miami, go Canes. He earned his CPM, Certified Purchasing Management, and CPSM, Certified Professional and Supply Management certifications from ISM. Michael resides in Charlotte, North Carolina with his wife and 2 children. Michael, as will I, will both be at ISM next week. If you are there, his session is Tuesday, April 9th at 3:45. Don't miss this opportunity. So enough for me. Let me turn it over to the real professionals. Michael, take it away.
Well, thank you, John. I'm pleased to be here and give a glimpse into our story here at LendingTree. So when it comes to organizational improvement and growth, I'm sure you've heard this before. There are 3 words that come to mind as being overused and overhyped. The first is transformation. The second is innovation. And the third, disruption. But what do they really mean? How many of us have actually taken the time to look them up? I know I hadn't before preparing this presentation, and if you haven't, don't worry, you're probably in the majority. I do, however, think it can be helpful, so we're going to take a quick peek at those definitions. Transformation means an act, process, or instance of transforming or being transformed, which means to change in composition or structure. In this context, you could consider it the initial and final states. Innovation means the introduction of something new, a new idea, method, or device. For us, the primary innovation was technology. And disruption means the act or process of disrupting something, a break or interruption in the normal course or continuation of an activity or process. In other words, specific changes to existing circumstances, and there can be many throughout an overall transformation process. The good thing is, the real meaning for you and your company are ultimately what you make it. And in a way, it's kind of like parenting. There really isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. There isn't an instruction booklet or a checklist that you can follow to just get it perfect. What we've done at LendingTree isn't the same as what everybody else has done, and what you've done or may embark upon can look different, and that's okay. Because in the end, this is about being better. Hopefully, some of the things that we've done well and some of the missteps that we've made will help you navigate similar circumstances. Transformation is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And one of the things that I reflect on when I need to take a step back and reframe my natural perspective is a quote from Byron Pollitt, the former CFO of Visa, which is, "Different isn't always better, but better is always different." Where did things begin? Let's flash back to my start at LendingTree. The first disruption, technically, was Gabe, then CFO, hiring me. And if you think back to the definitions we just reviewed, I could also be the innovation, but that's a little bit too fancy sounding for me to self-proclaim. And I want you to try and picture this. I arrive, it's my first day. Our headquarters building is a big rectangle consisting of 4 main quadrants and a central common area, which we call Town Hall. I get escorted to my desk, which happens to be in a quadrant where there is only one other person. It's dark, and it's quiet. Here's your desk and laptop, now go procure. It sounds like the punchline to a joke, and no, the nice person from HR didn't literally say that to me, but that is definitely when reality set in. I knew ahead of time why I was hired, and I was very excited about the opportunity. But then comes the realization that you're starting with nothing. No tools, processes, policies. The culture was very entrepreneurial, fast and loose, where employees were empowered to take charge and run with it. Basically, to figure out how to get things done. So for me, what could I do? I spent my first 3 weeks interviewing and introducing myself to everybody that I could. Preferably in person, but because we also had an office in Burlingame, some were via phone. These meetings consisted of me repeatedly answering, what is procurement? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do for them? How can I help the company? And I can clearly recall an early one-on-one with Gabe when he was trying to help and give me some guidance. And he said, why don't you put together a list of contracts that are going to expire over, let's say, the next year. So it'll give you a way to start working on things. And I said, that would be wonderful. How do I do that? And I said that to him because even though he didn't realize, you couldn't. It just so happens our legal team implemented a contract repository the month before I started, and 0 historical data had been entered. They did have some spreadsheets for me to work with, but needless to say, it was very frustrating for me and blew his mind. And from those meetings with the business owners, I found it very interesting that contrary to what I'd consistently experienced in prior lives, where a fairly common perception or misperception rather of procurement is that we do tactical tasks like issuing POs and buying stuff like office supplies. What I learned from those meetings at LendingTree is they thought I should only be involved in something if it was very costly or very strategic and important to the company. Which meant what? That they liked doing things their own way, that they weren't looking for a partner to support them, and I basically now entered a zone of conflict, as I referred to it, that I was going to have to treat with care and manage. One way that I wanted to make as big of an impact as early as possible was by volunteering for anything that I could to contribute and add value. Some ways that I was able to demonstrate value outside of a traditional swim lane for procurement are shown here. A couple of the more interesting ones were providing consultative guidance during negotiations for investment banking deal terms, as well as partnering with our CHRO when we had to navigate and negotiate with the city, county, and state an economic incentives package for a forthcoming headquarters relocation project. So aside from the obvious areas I had already known about, these also helped distill real areas of opportunity that had to be addressed. This meant that procurement needed to adapt. We had to evolve in order to effectively support the company as it continued to scale. And to better help you understand what we were managing at the time and where we were coming from that contributed to the need for change, here are a few stats. I joined in April of 2016, and for the balance of the year, completed 63 contracts. During that time, we made 2 acquisitions. In 2017, I hired my first team member in July. In total, we completed 130 contracts, and the company made 3 additional acquisitions. And then in 2018, another team member joined in January, so now we're up to 3, and we completed 400 contracts. And yes, the company made yet another 3 acquisitions. So as you can see and imagine, we needed to jump ahead and transform, if you will, which means some kind of disruption. We as procurement and sourcing leaders should embrace both innovation and disruption to drive effective transformation. I'd like to pause and think about that for a second. Procurement and sourcing leaders should embrace both innovation and disruption to drive effective transformation. For me, the key message here is to not be fearful or ignorant about what is often involved in these types of processes. Disruption piggybacks on the introduction of innovation. So what can you do for the disruption to be positive? You have to be aware of it, plan for it, and focus on how you will position and use the innovation. Where we started and where we are now, things have certainly changed. Our priorities and goals in 2016 were straightforward. I had to save LendingTree a ton of money, my CFO a ton of time. I had to learn the business, educate our stakeholders, and sell the value. Great, that was accomplished. Now we're in 2017, I'm stuck in the weeds, struggling to keep up with the demand. I had to grow the team, and we had to figure out a way to advance the original vision. And then, fortunately, at the end of 2017, it was finally time to evaluate tools. My first priority from early on had been spend analytics, but I also knew that a source-to-contract platform could make a greater impact for the company and other teams as a whole. And believe it or not, I got approval for both at the same time. However, navigating the process is not always easy. So again, where are we starting from? It's now early 18. There still wasn't a formal publicized policy or tools. There's absolutely no way we could look at introducing PRs and POs. The project scope and intended functionality was specific to our team. We had a new CFO join the company, so he naturally brought his own perspective and initial focus. And then, of course, there are stakeholder considerations. As many of you can probably relate to, although we're part of one process where we tend to be the gatekeeper or enforcer of others' policies, we really only own a piece of it. So our first step was to define our goals and desired end state. We wanted to simplify the process for everyone, not just ourselves. We wanted to make our day-to-day work much more efficient, resolve pain points, increase visibility and transparency, get out of disparate systems, and have all the information in one place. And then even though it wasn't necessarily going to be rolled out initially, have the capability of a formal approval process. We pushed forward and made progress. We ended up having about 15 providers that we evaluated. And of course, sometimes bad things happen. We hit a few hiccups, and more specifically, one of our stakeholders in AP reached out and asked, had you guys signed your contract yet? Which we hadn't. We were actually narrowed down to finalists, and we were looking as a next step to kick off POCs to reach a decision. But they had some requirements, and they wanted our support, and they wanted consideration for the same providers and a potential end-to-end solution. And of course, being good team players and thinking about LendingTree first and foremost, we paused our efforts, worked with them, explained the rationale and reasoning from the evaluation and decision-making up to that point. We had demos of functionality that had not originally been considered. Ultimately, this dragged on a little bit. They asked us to continue forward. It happened again, so we had a pause, restart, and then we continued on our own. We thought we'd averted the situation by involving all of our stakeholders early on. What are some of the things that we learned and advice we would give based on this experience? Think through how you can better manage your stakeholders and hold them accountable for their initial buy-in. Expect that you'll have to react and adjust to the unexpected. Always remain positive and supportive throughout the process, as painful as it may get. Don't lose sight of your goals or your timeline. Know that arriving at compromise takes time. Involved parties will likely be unhappy with the compromise, and certainly do not be afraid of hitting roadblocks and stepping on toes. What are some of the things that we did to set ourselves up for success? Well, communication and collaboration are essential. Collaboration, yes, I know, it's another one of those overhyped words. And we've all heard the saying, it takes a village. The point here basically being that greater participation will yield greater results. There was an interesting article in the Harvard Business Review this past September on team building and collaboration. And the most important misconception learned from the research was that quality collaboration does not begin with relationships and trust. It starts with a focus on individual motivations. I didn't know that when we had everything in process, but fortunately, we've always been and always were very customer focused. We worked with Scout to evaluate all of our workflows, all of the platform's features and functionalities, and pretty much customized or configured everything that could be. The idea was to minimize clicks and make it as fast, easy, and pain-free as possible. Again, from our customer's view, what are they going to have to do to submit a request? So intake was customized, milestone steps were customized, and we included them all, not just ones requiring approvals, because we want the business to see and understand the steps in the process, to know what has been completed, what was next, and what may be pending. And then there are statuses. We have very specific statuses. A couple examples are supplier legal contract review or spend management negotiation and process. We want the business to go see their dashboard and know what's happening and where it's at. Okay, great. So we went live, but we're not done. The internal campaign to remind people about the process, the solution, and the benefits are ongoing. Some of the key goals at the start of the process that we wanted to hit on are shown here. A simple process. Well, we have single sign-on. We have a very straightforward, easy questionnaire. We wanted visibility and transparency in the process. Now our customers can see everything. They can self-service. It's not a black hole where they have to reach out and get an update from us to understand what's happening. We wanted to enhance communication. The team chat functionality in Scout has definitely improved and facilitated stakeholder communication. Accountability for everybody involved, well, that can cut both ways depending upon who you ask. Everybody can see what's happening, where something is, what has been done, and what has not been done. The reporting capabilities are great. I use it to prep for weekly meetings with legal, monthly touch bases with some execs. And before, all of this was done manually, all in Excel. We had our pipeline, our savings tracker, and that just takes a lot of time to manage. Now that it's so simple, I have them saved, I run it, I might clean up some formatting, print or email it, and I'm done. And because of that, we're actually going to be tracking new things on an ongoing basis. And the biggest key for our team has definitely been project visibility. We are finally out of SharePoint, Outlook, and Excel hell. Well, mostly. We drive everything through intake, which can certainly make the volume challenging at times. But we've just adopted the approach that we wouldn't know what we wouldn't know, so we'd rather see it and have an opportunity to determine how best to handle it, versus not knowing at all. And then, of course, there have been many situations where even making one simple phone call, we've been able to make a significant impact. But you're still not done. You still need to keep stoking the fire. Communication, well, as nice as Scout helps simplify and make everything efficient, communication is not all systems-based, and people do still need to connect with people. For our team, one example is that we have a 24-hour SLA, where once we have a request received and assigned for the team member to actually get in touch and make contact with the business. Be the exception and know when to get out of your own way. When it comes to being the exception, I think of it as quite simply, don't just do what's expected, even if they'll be satisfied and if you're doing it well. Go the extra mile, go above and beyond. It will pay dividends. And in terms of knowing when to get out of your own way, it can be difficult at times to take off our sourcing or procurement hats. And I'm sure that most of you who do this are probably competitive, but I would stress you have to pause and really think from the business's view. What do they care about right now, and why? In our world, this typically translates to speed. So as much as I want to squeeze every drop out of every deal or get every single term negotiated as best as possible, sometimes the opportunity costs of not delivering sooner is far worse. Share the glory. You need to recognize the partnership and collaboration. Work to evolve the process so that we own the activity together to achieve optimal results. Plus, everybody likes to get some recognition and feel proud of their efforts. Well, we set ourselves up for communication, of course, should be a two-way street, and if you care about or want to manage perception, you have to first understand it. And what did we do in regards to this? We set ourselves up for some potential criticism. 2 months after going live, we sent our first ever customer service survey. We were very specific at the content. It had 6 required questions, 1 optional. It was anonymous, but we focused on things tied to performance, things that we could control, and if needed, that we could effect change. And again, going back to being aware and having a two-way street, you can't act upon something if you don't know about it. Fortunately, we had a very positive outcome, as you can see here. And moving forward, we're going to continue this on an annual basis. Things to remember for embracing innovation and disruption. Show a clear improvement and change. Gain support and buy-in by selling the value. Also, as mentioned before, thinking about their motivations. Instill an expectation of additional changes in time. Be flexible and willing to change for the greater good. There isn't any shame in altering the plan. None of this is about ego. And a quote that serves as a simple reminder along these lines is that in procurement yoga, you must find your own happiness. I didn't come up with that. I heard it at a conference, but I think it's great. And then when it comes back to transformation, it's a process, not an event. It will not happen overnight. It does require tweaking and adjusting over time. It should convey a clear difference of a before and after. You have to strive to keep things simple while thinking about your customers and stakeholders. And although these things are not necessarily rocket science, doing them well and making it happen can be very difficult. Thank you for your time. I'll now hand it off to Chris.
Wow, thanks, Michael. That's a really great story and a very rich set of learnings and takeaways that you've allowed for the audience to unpack. There are a couple things that I'll follow up on here that I've taken away. Let me try to move the slide here if I can. So the one thing you said I thought was very powerful is transformation is about being better. It's not really looking at what someone else is doing. I think that's a really great learning. I like that you talked about where you tried to find value outside of traditional procurement. And I think that's also a really great way to get experience, is dig in and find ways, don't stand still and analyze, but the way that you went about and tried to find other ways to drive value, and through that learned a lot in your process. And the last thing I would say is this notion of a journey, and I want to talk about that a little bit more here. In our experience here, we work with hundreds of organizations in helping them with similar types of transformations. And you know, I think in my 20 plus years of procurement, I've never experienced a procurement organization that has finished the journey. No one has really reached the state of nirvana. You know, no one has reached best practice or run out of additional ways to bring value to the business. So I think it's very important, regardless of where the organization is in the state of evolution, the state of maturity, or your journey, is to have a clear picture and understanding of where you are and where you want to go. One of the tools that we use very commonly with clients, we found very powerful, is to develop a multi-year roadmap, so 3, maybe up to 5 years. Start with having a pretty clear picture and document what is your vision. Your vision is not the same as another organization's vision. It has to be unique to what's important to you in the organization. It's almost step back and say, well, where do we want to be when we grow up as a procurement organization in the next 5 years? And document that. And then back up from there and say, okay, given where we are today, let's map out what do the next 3 to 5 years have to look like? What are the building blocks? What are the foundations that we need to set today to enable the next phases of our evolution and our journey? That's a very powerful tool for the organization, not just a procurement organization, to see where you're going, but also the rest of the organization to understand what has to be enabled and what change has to occur to make that happen in the future. We also commonly use maturity models, so much more detailed maturity models at the technology level or at the process level. You know, where are you with your state of maturity in different categories? You know, also very, very powerful tools that can be used in the process of mapping out your journey and your transformation. And Michael, I see in your story here, you know, great progress in really building that foundation, including the establishing a very strong technology platform that you'll then be able to build on in the future. So what I'm going to do is go through, I want to just leave you with 3 thoughts on kind of 3 themes that I've found are pretty important in any transformation. Again, we have a lot of time, but I just want to give you kind of 3 thoughts. And these aren't all. I mean, I think there are many more, but 3 that I think are very important with any transformation. You know, the first is working towards a model where you can have your vision and your strategy cast and aligned through your entire procurement cycle. You know, I think, you know, everyone in every organization seems to want to do that, but for example, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a beautiful category strategy, beautifully analyzed and written and documented, that essentially sits on a shelf and doesn't really drive activity that's going to make that strategy realize across, you know, the sourcing activity and the contracting and the actual buying behavior that occurs. So lots of potential disconnects that can occur where that value can erode. Even if your organization isn't mature to the point where you're deep into advanced category strategies, certainly opportunity to make sure that, you know, what you're buying at the point of purchase aligns with the, you know, the contract terms and conditions that you work so hard to put in place. And so with that, I think regardless of which stage you're in, I think this notion of a mindset, I think you'll find very helpful. So regardless of where your people sit in this process, where they sit in the procurement function, if you can align people around the mindset of where you're going and the mindset of this strategic future, that's going to help you and help the team work towards that vision so that everyone's contributing to that. Okay, point number 2 is working towards and building on the competencies of your team. So, I mean, you hear a lot about, you know, the future of procurement. Michael talked about his transformation here already towards capabilities that drive towards a more strategic function, to a function that is much more deeply aligned and integrated with stakeholders. So the element of relationship becomes more important. And you can think about traditionally, in a very traditional sense, the procurement function has more broadly focused on the skill sets around operational, transactional activities, project management, data analysis, and metrics. That's evolving. So evolving with the digitization and the availability of data, it's less about the analysis of that data and more about the synthesis of it and drawing insights and drawing inferences and connecting that to your category knowledge and the market knowledge to bring actionable insights that's going to drive value. It's the relationship-based skills for how you're going to build a strategy. Well, what's going to happen to that strategy? You have to influence. You have to sell that strategy. You have to be able to tell stories and influence stakeholders and build relationships to get your ideas and your strategies to stick and to occur within the business. Michael, I think you had a really good example of your story. That's a great example of storytelling. From my experience, that's an area that procurement people traditionally haven't been very strong in. You obviously don't have time to get into how you implement those competencies, but just very briefly, it's not just training. You have to go beyond training and think holistically about how you're reinforcing that. And just finally, I want to say on this point that as you make this transformation to these new skill sets and these new competencies, everybody's not going to be well suited for those. You will have team members that just, whether it's their capabilities or their desire, they just will not be well suited to the kinds of relationship or strategy-based skills that are needed for different roles, and that's okay. There certainly will be functions for them, in other areas as well. So the last thing I want to leave you with here is the third point around working towards and developing your future operating model, and one that's well suited and appropriate for your business. This model that I show here is one that a framework that we've leveraged across really most of our clients in one form or another, with the main principles here we found to be very effective. So it starts with really separating those more strategic activities from the more executional-based roles. You can see the role of the category manager here. That's really aligning and driving, integrating closely with stakeholders to develop and collaborate on strategies. Sometimes those roles you might have roles as business partners, that are focused on certain business units and maybe have a hybrid role where you also have different category managers. But generally, those strategic types of functions that you support and equip to be able to drive the strategy at the top of that. The element here of having some element of a centralized intake or a procurement services desk is very important. To catch the work that's coming in, to be able to organize it, to get it to where you have the right skills and the right teams to execute on that. So from an efficiency standpoint and flow, but also to make the user interface and the experience of your business stakeholders, you have low barriers to entry and very, very, very easy to work with. And then the execution teams here is establishing execution-based teams or centers of excellence that can then optimize and build the specific skill sets, whether it's in tactical management of a category, it's driving strategic sourcing or contract negotiation, is building those execution teams. And finally, all of this underpinned with a very strong technology platform, and I think Stan's going to talk more about that here. But having a strong technology platform that ultimately links these pieces together, as well as makes the interface not just with the procurement team, but with the extended stakeholder team easy to work with, so a natural way for stakeholders and procurement to interact across this cycle. So with that, I think I will pass it to Stan and let him continue on in our discussion.
Awesome, perfect. Thank you for that, Chris. Let's see. Do I have access to move the slides, or I don't know if you can move the next slide over?
You should be able to do that, Stan.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, if someone could just do some of the slides, that'd be great. For some reason, it's not going for me. But Michael and Chris, thank you for that. So as Michael walked through a little bit more of the journey itself on sort of what they did, and we've had a chance to partner with him and his team over the last year plus as we sort of gone through. And Chris talked a little bit about focusing on sort of how to think through it holistically, this idea of reach, effectiveness, and others, and just sort of how you actually should engage in the business. What I wanted to do, take a minute and talk a little bit about how technology really should become an enabler around it. Technology, ultimately sourcing is still done through personal connections, interactions with suppliers, interaction with the business, but all of it has to come together in a slightly different way. And for us, what we want to focus on heavily is just when we developed Scout years ago, about 5 years ago now, we took a slightly different approach. And our guiding principles and how we think about the actual product just went in just a completely different direction than the market. When you think through on how we develop the actual product itself and how we went to it, is our core principles and underlying, there's really 3 core buckets. It's this idea of high adoption, rapid time to value, and something very overlooked by technology providers is this idea of an enjoyable experience. And when you think about these all 3 things, really, you should be experiencing that through this idea of consumer-related products. When you think of jumping on anything from Google to Facebook to Amazon, et cetera, like everything you think about those products, they're high adoption, quick time to value, and when things do, technology is not perfect, but when things do come up, you always get the support you need when you need it. And this idea of consumerization of the enterprise has been going on for years now, where we're taking the same interfaces, the same ideas, and applying it to enterprise-grade tools. And from the world on sourcing and procurement, it's really taking this into a different approach, not just, hey, the end users that will actually be using this tool to do the job. It's how do you start the conversation with all of your stakeholders? How do you bring your suppliers into the mix? And putting this all in one place, that's a different way to approach it. It's actually letting the technology enable the process itself. So when Scout started up, when we started up originally, so 5 years ago, we came with a very simple idea that said, hey, let's look at just the RFP side of it. And when we were ourselves, when we started it, myself and the other founders, we weren't practitioners in the industry ourselves. So we just went out and spoke to individuals and sort of asked them what they were using and how they were using. And overwhelmingly, what we heard was we had tons of software in place, but when it came to strategic sourcing and even running bids, it always became an afterthought. Oh, we sort of entered the project afterwards. We didn't really use the actual tech that we had. It was always run through email and Excel offline. So the comparisons always took a while. So our approach was, how about we just build a one-page interface, launch it, and really quickly just see how folks interact with it. So we did. So 5 years ago, that's how Scout was born. We launched the simple idea of one-page interface and interacting with end users, and something that you can collaborate, chat with everybody. And from there, what ended up happening is, fast forward about a year after we launched the company, we in essence went back to our customers, and then we just started asking them very simple questions of how do you enjoy, how was the experience, how are you interacting with the program, how are your suppliers? And overwhelmingly, what we got was very quickly was this idea of, hey, like RFPs are great, but realistically, what ended up happening is we just need a lot more to do our jobs. And we asked, well, how are you managing the organization today? And how are you managing, and Chris alluded to this, and so to Michael, of, hey, how are you engaging with the stakeholders? How are you tracking all your projects? And most organizations, as Michael mentioned, email, SharePoint, for ticketing, for project tracking, for organizations, they're very static applications that don't allow for a whole lot of communication with stakeholders. They're very siloed to individuals. And when you think of modern tools today, from Salesforce to HCM like Workday and others, there's just a lot of different ways and different platforms for each business function, but sourcing didn't have their own. So this idea, what we worked with our customers, this concept of intake, which is a way which is a request to come into the business, so you can actually start the SLA countdown. So in Michael's case, it's 24 hours. Other businesses have the longer or shorter periods of time. Going into pipeline, a true pipeline view of, hey, what's actually happening within the product? How are people actually using the platform today? Meaning I can track every activity my sourcing organization is doing as I meet with individuals, as I meet with my CFO, as I meet with my lieutenant. I can literally see, doesn't matter if it's sourcing, supplier performance, negotiation, et cetera. When you need to run the event, you go through that. But then also, as our customers taught us, they started using our actual tool set to do things like pipeline, like contract storage, or actually using the RFP tool to do supplier reviews and ongoing. So putting that all in one place. So the ability to actually store the contract, alert on it, supplier performance, supplier forms, onboarding, all of that, and it all links back to pipeline because all of this goes back to one another as things come up. So all in one view. And for us, what realistically in our core value, when I sort of started talking in the beginning, time to value, what we wanted to bring to market was something that doesn't require a huge investment of your resources, IT's time. This is a tool that you should be using that could talk to the entire business. And really proud to say in a recent survey we ran, 89% of our customers were able to deploy the platform within literally a week of sign up from the RFX side of the thing. And we've had our longest, I think, maybe takes about 30 days across the board. So with that, the idea is ROI and cash impact should be the byproducts of that really quickly as you're able to actually go in and put the projects, the dollars, the visibility all in it really quickly so you can actually start sharing, communicating with all the stakeholders around that. So since we've launched the company itself, we have a little bit north, it's actually 185 plus customers now today, bids all around. I think we were north of 43,000 plus RFPs just in Scout alone, over almost 25 billion in project spend today from pipeline, 3.5 billion in saved logs. And just some of the customers we work with today, ranges from a whole slew of verticals, whether it's indirect, direct spend, just on different areas all around the board. So when you think through just some of the customers, and everything is, and a lot of these customers from technology to retailers to CPG, we actually just rolled out Philip Morris yesterday, globally over 500 users that were operationalized and rolled out with less than a quarter across the board. And for us, it's just simplicity and ease of use. That's what we're really focusing on. And for us, we can show you and talk about it, but it's great we work with Denali as well on several engagements. We worked with Michael and his team to roll us out. The biggest thing for us though is customers and how we think about it. Our number one value at Scout is the actual customer. And for us, Gartner actually just gave us our Customer Choice Award. We have the highest ranking for a strategic sourcing platform in the marketplace. We're also the youngest in that category by a wide margin. But it just shows our number one value with as a customer obsessed, but how we think about high adoption, time to value, and enjoyable experience. Those are the three real guiding principles. And beyond Scout or anything, these are the things that you should be looking at when you think about a solution or technology provider. Beyond sourcing, spend, anything you're doing for the business, because that's the other thing to ask ultimately is when you bring in, because you're sourcing software solutions all the time for the business itself, like how will this be utilized? Will this actually impact, or is one person going to be using it? And what's the core value of that? When you think through that, it's a different way to buy software, and much more companies are focusing on UX, UI, high adoption, and less on, hey, how many features can I shove into the platform, and how do I actually get true value and true data integration, so putting it all in one place. And we've had the privilege to do that with Michael and several others. So I think with that, I think we're going to open it up to questions from the audience.
Well, thank you, Stan. I certainly appreciate that. So while I get to our first question, let me remind the audience, the questions are open. Please go to the Q&A box and type in your questions. I do have a couple of questions in queue, so I'll just jump right in. I don't know if they're to one person in particular, so I'll allow all of you to answer them. So the first question asks, what was the key to securing executive support for transforming processes and tools? Is that one geared towards Michael maybe more?
Yeah, this is Michael. So one of the keys was definitely being able to service our customers and meet their expectations. And as I mentioned during the presentation, speed is important, and helping them achieve their goals in the timeframes that are necessary was important. So once we started to prove the value and have customers coming back, ultimately we reached a point where we needed something that would enable us to do it more efficiently, which also would help prioritize. And once we could have that, we could show more information and visibility and find other areas to add value. So that's pretty much the basis of what drove it on our side.
All right, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. I've got another one that's also directed for you. So once again, I'll remind our attendees, please type your questions in the box. We've got quite a few in the queue, but we've got about 8 minutes for Q&A. So, Michael, what are some of the key initiatives that you're planning on tackling for the remainder of this year?
So one of the initiatives that we have is a travel platform and program. Another one is working with our new general counsel and chief accounting officer to refresh the legal contract review policy, which embedded within that are accounting requirements that include all contracts going to AP for approval, unless it's LendingTree paper, which we use primarily supplier paper. We're about to kick off an internal outreach program, which our team will be meeting with every single team quarterly. And we want to basically break down and get together, show them data now that we have the capability of reporting, and really have that face time. So instead of just being at the higher leadership levels, which we already have established good relationships, getting with the entire team together. And then we'd like to implement or drive the implementation rather of a P card policy. Again, when I joined, we were very different. We were about 250 employees, 2 office locations. You know, fast forward 3 years, we're about 1,100 employees and, 9 office locations. So it's very different, and some of the policies haven't kept up. So implementation of a P card policy would definitely help how we manage and give guidance for treatment of requests. So those are the main ones that come to mind.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to jump right into more questions. This question asks, from your point of view, and I don't know who they're specifically asking this of, how will the new Industry 4.0 trends affect purchasing? I think that could be for any one of our panelists today.
Yeah, this is Chris. I'll jump in on that. Yeah,
Thanks, Chris.
I would say, if you look at, I know many people are familiar with the Procurement 4.0 framework, kind of points a lot to the future digitization of procurement. I know there's obviously a lot of discussion and buzz around that topic. When I think about that from where people are sitting today, I think there's a couple things that, when you think about what is the focus of that category management or Procurement 4.0, it's still oriented towards driving increased business value to the organization. That's really in terms of the goal and objective of that, enabling future disruptive strategies that are going to help to get there. But still, at the end of the day, it's about driving and getting to increased business value. There's obviously a lot of technologies that are evolving, the machine learning, artificial intelligence, and other things. I think it's important, though, to a lot of organizations and where they're sitting today is in preparation for that, is to make sure that you're, I would say, mastering the fundamentals. So thinking about your processes, thinking about your core technology platforms, thinking about your operating model, those are all really important enablers to then making those future digitization strategies a reality. Every provider of digital technologies, whether you're talking about RPA or others, will tell you want to make sure that you're building that off of a strong foundation, a strong process foundation, before you're implementing those technologies. So just a couple thoughts on that.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add, you're spot on with that. And the other thing is that, as you alluded to this as well, is like you'll sort of see this common theme, especially over the next, I would say, few years. This idea of we're sort of in a connected revolution right now happening. Mark Benioff talks a lot about this in his keynotes. We also talked about it at Spark at our user conference last month, where we really when you think about technology and just the amount of money and investment being made, because there's so many different systems, so many great things, you really do want to find the solution that's best for what you want to do. but it is having that conversation with the partners of what's your integration plans, what's your connected mind frame. When you think of Salesforce spending $6.5 billion on a company called MuleSoft, that's just whole ideas to be an integrator. And there's another 5, 6 different organizations like that globally today whose sole focus are being built on going in within companies being an integrated layer and really allowing the business to be much more selective of, hey, we don't have to go to a big organization like SAP and Oracle and just buy end-to-end across the board. It's how do we bring in the tool sets that will actually help us do the job across all of those functions. And as long as there is a plan and fundamentally lay out how to actually talk and work together, I see that being another big piece of sort of this idea of future. The buyer will have a lot more discretion at their disposal.
Thank you, Stan. Appreciate your insights. I'm going to jump right into another questions. We've got a lot in queue. Very good presentation, very interactive. So this question is for both Chris and Michael. Can you talk a bit about building a business case for transformation?
Michael, you want to start on that one?
Sure. I mean, I had the benefit of not having to get too terribly formal and jumping through a lot of hoops that I know are necessary in organizations that are, further along. Our CEO and CFO recognized the need for the function which did not exist, which is why I was brought on. And from there, it was just step by step, making sure I communicated what was happening and the value that was being delivered, and really embedding ourselves in the business. So once that was done, I mean, fortunately, they wanted to tool me to put in place processes how they should be. I didn't have to try to work around or fix pre-existing processes. The only challenge I really had was the limitation on resources and time. So I was definitely benefiting from those circumstances, but I guess what I would say is, in putting together the business case, really focus on the areas of biggest impact. What is needed and what can you drive? Like if it's technology, what will the outcomes be? And actually have data to support it, and have an honest, candid conversation around it.
Yeah, that's good, Michael. I agree with all that. The only thing I would add to that is I think some things we talked about in terms of the journey and building out a roadmap can be very helpful in getting yourself organized, getting your team organized around where you want to go. What is your vision truly? Put some definition to that. Build out the roadmap in terms of the people, process, and technology that are going to be required for the building blocks to get you there. And that's a really good foundation to do what Michael said. Now build up. Now where's the value going to come from? Based on what you have to accomplish, where can you start driving that value? And as you're making the transformation, where can you bring immediate value? Whether it's implementing a platform that's going to allow you to accelerate your rate of sourcing by 2x and drive savings, whether there's a key organizational initiative, say around risk or around speed to market or innovation that you can then tie a category strategy to and accelerate that as part of your roadmap to make sure you're demonstrating and driving value early on. But I think getting organized around, understanding where you want to go and mapping out, the elements that you think you're going to need to get there can be very helpful.
Well, thank you, Chris. And with that, I do want to say we have a lot of questions in queue. Very good conversation and dialogue today. A lot of great insights, and we truly appreciate that. Those of you that did ask questions in the Q&A box that we did not get to, and there were quite a few in there, we will share them with our presenters, and I'm sure they will get back and follow up with you. So that does conclude today's webinar. I do want to thank our presenters, Stan, Chris, and Michael, also the Scout and Denali team for sharing your insights with. We do look forward to connecting with you. We're currently pushing out a PDF copy of the slides. You should see it popping up on your screen as we speak. Please click the link on your WebEx screen and download it straight from your desktop. Thank you for sharing those slides. Also, keep an eye out for the follow-up email you will receive tomorrow, which includes the PDF as well as a link to the recording of this session, and feel free to share this with your colleagues. If you have any questions, please reach out to presenters or us directly. Again, thank you all for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all very much.